Hello, everybody. It is Pseudo with MMOBuff. It is Wednesday, which means it's top draw, which means in a couple of moments we're going to have me fold and bend space and time so that I can summon the lovely Dr. Marshmellows, who we lovingly call a immortal who does everything he can to help us really pull things across. When it comes to how things function and whether this is a response to the episode about how they removed divine intervention from World of Warcraft Paladins. No. This is something else entirely different. In fact, this particular Top Draw episode is about Paladins, but we had a request. Somebody requested to see the aggro deck made by the Mage, or made by Marsh for the Mage in the last episode in action. And one of the fantastic things that we have occurring today is me showing you that particular deck in action. Then we're going to look at some other things that have occurred, and Marsh, of course, will be summoned, but I want you to pay very close attention to Marsh, because as I said, something interesting has happened. Now, as a reminder to everyone, this particular next coming up part of the show is pre-recorded because Marsh lives in Australia. Getting us together to cross the streams of time and space without opening up a door to the apocalypse for Cthulhu to walk through is a little difficult. I am, however, going to be here in chat, and Marsh may show up if the time allows for him to do so. But what I would like for you guys to do is, if you have literally any questions, to bring them in. I will do my best to answer them, and if Marsh shows up, we'll have Marsh answer them. And if Marsh's schedule is a little confusing because Marsh is beached, then we will just go ahead and bring those questions to Marsh next week. There is something to note. Marsh makes a prediction in this particular interview that I did with him, and I want you to be aware that like 8 hours after his prediction, something did occur. Not quite what he predicted, but something did occur. And I want you to see if you can figure out what the prediction was and what may have happened and transpired. But wibbly wobbly timey wimey. Yes, BC hilarious. That is pretty much what it is in Top Draw on Wednesdays. It literally becomes something that you need Doctor Who to unravel, and if you're lucky, Doctor Who could probably get together with a few of the other space and time explorers out there, but I like the timey-wimey wibbly wobbly. So yes, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to directly go into the interview. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by showing you this aggro deck, this Mage Agro Deck that was made by Marsh in action. And then we're going to sacrifice to summon the immortal Marsh to us, and then watch Marsh. That's all I'm going to say. And no, it's tapping the side of the nose. That's side nose tap. But anyway, here is that Mage deck in action, as requested, which means I should get a gold star from the audience. I am still keeping track of the stars. Just because they don't show up on the screen doesn't mean they're not being kept track of. I will get to the zoo at some point, and for those who are not sure what I mean, we referenced that about 3 episodes ago. But anyway, here you go. Enjoy.
Welcome, mortals, to the game I'm probably going to lose simply because I'm showing it to you. So we're starting out with the Aggro Mage deck today. So we've got a Crazed Alchemist and a Mana Worm on the play. That's a very good starting combo. Obviously the Leroy Jenkins is going to go in the bin at this point because he just costs a little bit too much and we don't need him at this point. I'd rather have something a little bit more effective. There we go, Knife Juggler, very good for us at this starting point. So we're going to go ahead and play the Mana Worm straight up. Even though we don't have many spells, we can Crazed Alchemist at next turn, just make it start getting very big if we need to. Or we can start gaining some board control with our Knife Juggler and start dropping creatures and getting very effective trades. So he's going to go ahead and coin first out, straight into a Totemic Call, which is very interesting. So obviously we're going to just straight up trade that with our Mana Worm. And because the Crazed Alchemist isn't going to be amazing on our Mana Worm anymore, I think I'm just going to drop the Knife Juggler here and say go. This lets us kill most of the 2-drops he's going to be able to put out in some fashion, either with dropping a creature and trading into it, or Crazed Alchemist. Something along those lines is probably going to happen. So the best thing we can hope for, well, didn't quite happen, but that's alright. We'll still go ahead and drop a fairy dragon and see if we can hit it. No, that's fine. We're still just going to drop the mana worm straight into it and attack him for 3. So this mana worm's done a lot of work for us. He costs 1 mana and he's been able to soak up 2 of his turns and 4 mana from this shaman. So it's a very effective creature for us today. So I think today we are going to use our Crazed Alchemist to change this into a 2/4. Right. And then we're going to go ahead and Fire Blast it and use our Mana Worm to finally kill it. We're going to attack him for 6. And there we go. So I did that instead of using the Fireball because the Fireball is just so much extra damage. That extra 2 points goes a really long way. So we're in a bit of a dicey position if he uses a AoE clear spell, but he's not. He's just going to go ahead and Lightning Bolt, get rid of my Knife Juggler, and Totem. And not a very good Totem for him. So we'll just drop our Chillwind Yeti, keep the board control up. Always take out those totems because there's so much extra that a shaman can do when they have those utility totems on the board. It's a lot more effective to get rid of those totems and make it so that you put nothing and get rid of his 2 mana drop, as opposed to letting it stick around and maybe it causing you to lose a game. So we're going to go ahead and try and take out a lot of these. I think I'm just going to run my Chillwind Yeti and Fireball one. That way I'm not losing any board presence. If he had a AoE clear, he would have used it by now. So if he doesn't draw it, if he plays it next turn, he would have had to have either drawn it or been really holding on to it. So we've got lots of presence on the board. We don't have card parity. He's got a lot of cards in hand. 7 cards is a lot of stuff to have to deal with. But he can't do too much with only 6 mana. So he just hexes our Yeti and passes turn. So we're just going to keep the beats up, as you do. We'll drop a little bit more presence, but I'm not comfortable dropping much more than that. We don't really need to. He's on a 5-turn clock. So unless he heals at some point, he's dead next turn if he can't drop either Taunters or an AoE to kill everything. So we're looking really, really good at this point. And even if he does, there we go, we've got the Concede. So that's very much the essence of this Mage deck. It tries to get very good, effective trades. So as you saw, I threw my 1 mana 1/3 Wyrm in over and over and over into his stuff. So for my 1 mana, I got 6 of his mana and 3 of his turns. That is probably the most effective mana worm I've ever had. It just uses all these tiny little combos, but they work so well together that it makes the deck work overall. So it is a very advanced technique to try and build so many little combos into a deck, but give it a try. If it doesn't work, take one out, put something else in, make it a little bit more consistent, give it some card draw. Just try lots of different things and eventually you'll get the hang of it. So let me know how it goes. Send me some deck lists. I'll more than happy to playtest stuff if you have any questions.
And what we have just witnessed in action is the most amazing Mage Agro Deck ever. This is the aggro deck that you, Dr. Marsh, presented to us last episode. It was requested to see, and now we have seen it, and we've seen it in action, and it has been good. That Mana Worm.
It's probably the most amazing thing that has ever happened to an aggro mage ever.
And you caught it on tape. But what we also know is that that particular deck, and a deck we'll look at later in this episode known as the Chua Sacrifice, have enabled us to do something that we've never been able to do before on Top Draw. We have sacrificed enough Chua to do something spiffy. Cue sound effects. And hey Marsh, it's you.
Greetings, mortals.
I love
the Chua
that.
Sacrifice has greased the cage, the lock. I'm free. Freedom! Freedom! No? Okay. Whatever.
I know, I appreciate it by your omnipotenceness. Is that even a word?
Ah,
Omnipotentness?
not a clue. I don't think so. I am the linguist here. I'm the reigning linguist of MMOBuff, and I have no idea.
Well, I am notorious for making up my own words. So, I have questions for you about that lovely I was about to say Magro play. Mage Agro Deck.
No, no, I like Magro. I think from now on we might have to call it Magro.
Magro.
Magro. Angry Marge Simpson over you in the shower. The bloody butcher knife. She's a little bit pissed. She's Magro. That's what she is.
Wow, Jana Pradmore, welcome to The Simpsons.
So this Magro deck, you had
Yes.
questions.
I have many questions about your Magro deck. To start off was, what's the name of your Magro deck?
Well, isn't it obvious? Magro now.
What was it
It was
before?
before this lucky accident, it was Kamehameha because
Which,
fireballs.
because that is the Hawaiian god, I believe, of fire.
Is it? I don't know.
No, no,
Maybe
no,
it's
he was an
it's
actual
from Dragon
person.
Ball Z.
No, no, oh, see, that's different. There's also a Kamehameha from Hawaii who was in Civ 5, Sid Meier's. Boom! There you go. Moving on quickly.
Before the embarrassment sets in.
Yes, before the embarrassment sets in too much, a couple of questions for you. Um, One of the things you said that was interesting about the hand, and it was in the very first turn of your opponent, the shaman, who decided to coin and then do a totemic call. Now,
Yeah.
we've never really touched on the coin in this show, and it is a unique feature to Hearthstone. And what I want to talk about with you is a little bit about why that you thought that was an interesting play. And I'd also like to know a little bit about your thoughts about when is the best time to use the coin, because us mortals need as much help and support as we can get. So coin, discuss.
Sure. So coin is quite possibly the most important card you will ever get ever. End story. The end.
Well,
So
isn't it
it will
like,
dictate.
sorry, I'm totally
Yes.
interrupting you. Isn't it like card 31?
It's card 30 and a half. Basically, you might get it, you might not. Luck of the draw, really. Thus is the case, but it really dictates what cards you can keep in your hand, what cards you can throw away, how you're going to play your early game, how you can play your mid game, how you can play your late game. It'll it will dictate how your hand plays out and how your deck can play out based on what cards it helps you to play and what cards it helps you to deal with. So it's very important that you effectively play a coin. So our example is a case of a very ineffective way to use the coin. The coin is there to sort of deal with the power struggle that happens between who goes first and who goes second. So lots of card games deal with it very differently. Magic the Gathering deals with it by the player who goes first not being able to draw a card, which makes up for them being able to play the first resource, the first creature, attack first, all that sort of stuff. Whereas the player that goes second gets to draw their second card, which is a very big boon in Magic the Gathering. Those extra cards matter a lot.
Yeah, they
But
do.
but when your deck limit is a lot lower, the inconsistency of what you draw is a lot lower as well. So that extra card doesn't matter as much. So it needs to be off-put in a different way in Hearthstone. And the way they've done it is a very eloquent way in which they give you a temporary mana boost in order to offset the advantages gained by going first. And there was a big hoo-ha, especially in early beta, about the power level of the coin. In Rogue, it was a big thing for a while in Rogue before Rogue got hit by the biggest nerf hammer I've ever seen in my life. But The story for another time, perhaps.
When we bring
But
up rogues.
that's it. But on balance, Blizzard has been very forthcoming with a lot of their metrics for who wins and going first, going second, and what class, and how prevalent are certain decks winning based on whether they get the coin or whether they go first. All that sort of data, especially in early beta, was very accessible to the players. So you could base a lot of your opinions around very hard statistical data, which made your
Right.
interpretations a lot easier and your justifications a lot easier to keep the coin or whether the coin was not a good idea. So I think it's worked out very well, and all that's happened is that players have had to adapt to a new way of thinking, a new way of playing to incorporate the coin into their play styles. So it used to be coin would always be, who can get the biggest card out fastest, who can get that two drop faster. So do you get it on turn two as the player going first, or you get it on turn two as the player going, turn one as the player going second? That used to be all it's about. These days, that's evolved to use the coin sort of to help you with your mana curve and help you get out threats that are more important. So it's not always play it as immediately as possible. Oh my god, I'm going to lose if I don't use it.
Right.
So it's the evolution. It's a very eloquent way of dealing with a very big problem that they had to start with.
Well, in most game design, this is actually something that was brought up in our show last night. Game design can have a huge impact on a metagame. Uh, and it seems to me that the choice to bring in the actual coin is something that brought up implications that they may or may not have considered. And I mean, it just seems to me because you get the coin if you're second, end of story, right?
Yes.
And that you also get an extra card if you are second. You're
Yes.
basically being handed all of the tools. All of them.
Yeah.
You are being handed all the tools. And to me, that would seem to put you at such an advantage. Now, this is someone speaking who's really starting to learn about how metagame works and how cards really do interact. And I'm learning terminology and things like that. So I may have a skewed perspective on this. But to me, it just seems to be this huge bonus to the second player.
It is. It's a very
But
big bonus. Like, if I was. But.
yeah, it's a whole thing. It's but as we have seen, if you don't
Yeah.
use that well, it can be really bad. Now, here's the thing. What I didn't get, and this sort of struck me as odd, and maybe I'll get a gold star for this, maybe I won't. I don't know. But when they actually played the mana coin and drew the totemic call or played the totemic call, it seemed to me that they just thought it was must use it so that I'm on equal footing. I mean, we don't know
Yeah, and
what cards they had in their hands, so it's kind of difficult for us to say whether they were screwed or not. That's we don't know whether they did the mulligan well or whether their deck was set up properly, and all these things contribute to it. But to me, playing a mana coin and doing totemic call seems to be a last resort choice if you want to use the mana coin to bring a totemic. Make that call. It just seems to be a move of desperation. And on the first turn, my brain just kind of went, what?
it is a bit of a strange first turn play because you're weighing the percentages. So
Math.
you have a
We
20.
do that on this show.
Yes, apparently this analytical website does math at some point. I'm not a math teacher. I'm an English teacher, in essence.
You're
I do
also
language,
immortal.
so percentages may be off a little here. But as far as I understand it, you have a 25% chance of getting any individual totem on the very first use of totemic call. So he
What do you
had
mean only the
a
first? Does it change?
well because you can only have one of each type in play. Then it goes to
Oh!
33%, 0.33, then to 50%, then to 100%. So I don't think they have compounding percentages in this game. So
Right.
as far as I'm aware, it's 25% on his first call to either get one of three mildly useful totems or one completely useless totem. And it just doesn't seem like a good play to me. You have 30 life. At worst, you're going to be taking 2 damage if I play a spell. You're going to be taking 2 damage from that mana worm. I'd 100% take that 2 damage every single game because you're investing that huge advantage that you've been given in the coin. You're investing it to stop A damage. And you're not even investing it to stop A damage and kill my mana worm. You're doing it just to stop the damage. And at the end of the day, he gambled, and he gambled poorly because he got the 1/1, which was the 25% that he did not want. That was the absolute worst one for him to draw, and he effectively wasted his first 2 turns getting those totems out to do nothing. And that is in essence what lost him that game to start with, because he just started out so slow, making poor choices. And as you said, we don't know all the factors to it, but even if you knew all the factors, there is almost never a reason to do a first turn coin recall. Or totemic call, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, it just seemed, like I said, it seemed like a move of desperation. At least that particular combination did.
Yes.
But it also seems to me to be, looking back on it, like the same mistakes I used to make, where I used to hoard my life in fear being hit, where I didn't quite understand that being hit is fine, because they hit me, but that's cool because now I have all of this that I can smack them with, lay the smack down, and be all like, yeah, so you've now eaten that, now what? You know,
That's exactly it.
I think in a way it's the common noob mistakes we make because we are unaware, and it doesn't mean that someone is a very poor player. It just means that they haven't quite grasped where things are at yet.
Well, that's it.
That's the way I like to look at it. I call myself a noob. I'm a noob.
I'd never call anyone a noob because everyone's been there. I feel like a noob sometimes, but yeah, it's rookie mistakes. It's beginner mistakes. We don't need to associate it with a derogatory term in noob, but it's something that everybody makes. No matter who you talk to, someone made that mistake at some point.
Yeah. I know for a fact that I've done something very similar. Trying to manage the coin has always been one of to me, it's like that cherry on top. If I can't get the cake right, I'm going to screw that cherry up. And I'm so afraid to try to play with the cherry that sometimes I'll actually go a game and never put it down. Ever. And I'll still lose. And that's because I am a rookie/noob. I won't make those mistakes now because we're going through so much, but you know.
It's the rice that tips the scale, right?
Absolutely. Right. Another thing that you mentioned, which is something we haven't really talked about on Top Draw yet. And again, more terminology. Yay, terms. But in this particular case, you mentioned card parity.
Yes.
Is card parity a little bit sort of like the polar channels of the North and the South Pole spinning the world? No. No.
Parody? No. Not going to make the obvious satire joke there. It's a parody. Yeah. No?
I tried to avoid it and take it a different direction.
Well, it failed. Let us continue. So card parody is a very basic term that people within the TCG community, it uses it in some way, has different words. Like a lot of the stuff we cover, we're very much using my terminology that I learned when I was playing. But card parity is effectively, if you combine the cards you have in hand and the cards you have on the table, that is the amount of cards you have in total. Then you combine your opponent's cards they have in hand and the opponent's cards they have on the table, and that's their amount of cards they have in total. And if you have the same amount of cards, you have card parity. So it's the same. It's the same but different. Same amount of cards, different cards. What you're always aiming for is to either have card parity or to have card parity +1. +1 is what you really want. -1's okay. But +1 or more is what you're looking for. You're looking to have either more creatures on the board or more cards in hand to deal with their creatures and all that sort of stuff. So that's your combination of all the stuff we've been talking about before in board control, in card advantage, and life advantage. Using all those sorts of things should get you your parity.
Okay, see that makes a heck of a lot more sense now. It's just that a combination of all this stuff that we've already done with the foundational work and understanding our terms, and now we know those, we make it more complex by bringing them together to create another term that allows you to gauge how those particular metrics work together to create a successful game.
Yes. So it's
Ta-da!
it's another level for you, another thing on the rung. You keep putting those steps up.
So now we're starting to move a little bit into the intermediate play or the beginner after
No,
the basic. It's still beginner.
that one.
Okay.
Hang your
Okay.
head in shame.
Okay. Anyway, another thing that you said, which kind of struck me as, huh? I've never heard it before, was 5 turn clock.
Yeah,
Clocks? Are we actually dealing with clocks? Do I need to set my watch to the card game? I mean,
that'd be amazing. I want to do that. I want my new smartwatch to be able to play Hearthstone. That'd be get on that, Blizzard.
well,
Someone in Blizzard
I
better be
mean,
on
I've
that.
got it. I'm using a Pebble. I'm sure someone could write an API to actually interact as to whether or not it would be very successful.
Get on that interweb, people. Go my minions. Um, so a clock's basically just the countdown. It's the countdown of how many turns am I going to kill you in if nothing changes. So my
Keeping if
5 turn
nothing
clock.
changes.
Well, that's it. If my 5 turn clock was the result of my mage passive. Technically, a mage always has a 30 turn clock or a 31 turn clock because you always have that mage passive that you could. If your game lasted 30 turns and you were able to use your mage passive on every turn, your opponent would be dead more than likely. Unfortunately, you'd be dead way before that. But
Unless I
at the
never
start of the
did
game,
anything.
well, that's it. But at the start of the game, sounds pretty good to have a 30 turn clock. Like, effectively, it's the amount of turns that you can kill your opponent in the best case circumstances for you. So if you play a big stompy 10-10 dude on turn 1, you are on a 3 turn clock. You're giving someone 3 turns to either deal with what you have or die horribly in a pit of agony.
Why's it always got to be a pit with you, Marsh?
I like them. They're cozy.
Okay, so based on what you're saying, let me see if I get this right now. When it comes to the clock, let's say that I have, a card down. We'll go with a Chillwind Yeti, okay? I have a Chillwind Yeti down. And a Chillwind Yeti hits for 4. And let's say nothing changes. That roughly gives me, and I say roughly because 4 doesn't go into 30 very evenly, does it? But that
Because
roughly,
math.
because math, but that roughly gives me a 8 turn clock.
Yeah, about that.
And it would sound to me that when it comes to aggro decks, your job is to try to make that clock as small as possible.
Oh yeah.
Whereas if you're in a control deck, what you're trying to do is control your clock.
Yes. That's pretty much how it works out. An aggro deck effectively goes, this is your clock now. Next turn, your clock is a lot shorter, and now it's a lot shorter again. So you have a 30 turn clock on turn 1. Now you have a 18 turn clock on turn 2. You have a
Right.
9 turn clock on turn 3. You have a 3 turn clock on turn 4. That sort of stuff. Where a control deck's like, alright, you've put me on a 30 turn clock. Well, I'm going to do something to make sure that I'm on an infinite clock. And then, so you've put me on a 3 turn clock. Well, I'm going to deal with that. So now I'm just on I'm on a 20 turn clock. They mitigate the game state so that their clock goes up, whereas aggro makes it so that your opponent's clock goes down.
Yay, clocks!
Yes, clocks are amazing.
Absolutely. But yes, so as was requested, we have now looked at the Magro deck,
Yeah.
and we have seen how the Magro deck works. Next up, the choice de jour, the Paladin.
Choice du jour. I don't really do French too much, but I'm guessing that means this is when we talk about Paladin.
Yes, this is when we talk about Paladin,
Good work.
especially
Good work,
considering
Marsh.
the Paladin is like your favorite deck to the point that you girly screamed your head off when I mentioned last episode that we were going to discuss the Paladin.
Yeah, I did scream somewhat like a little girl. I was somewhat excited. It was good times.
It was great times.
I went skipping down paths with marshmallows for my grandma. You know, tried to squeeze myself into my little red jumper. Didn't work, so it became a hood.
A little hood, a little red hood. Are
Yes.
are you trying
You
to
not
say
get
that
the
you're Little Red
reference?
Riding Hood?
Of course I am. Although technically I am Little Red Riding Hood at the point of the story after she gets mauled by the wolf, and then the wolf puts on her clothes. Because that's how I roll.
Great, you've heard it here first. Dr. Marsh, immortal, takes sacrifices, and is the wolf that's eaten Little Red Riding Hood. Which means all
Yeah,
of the
more or less.
supporters and people who sacrifice Chuas on your behalf should wear red hoods, right? Right?
Sure, we'll go with that. Why not? I think interesting. I want a photo now of just flocks of people in red hoods and no one knows why.
Now, see, what I would love to see on behalf of that, and it's not quite that, I'd love to see someone take pictures of penguins and put hoods on penguins, red hoods on penguins. No one would
Red hoods on
understand
penguins.
why,
Yes.
but, you know.
The internet is built to be confusing, right? Delicious penguins in red suits.
Would you eat them or sacrifice the penguins? I thought you just sacrificed Chua.
I haven't decided yet.
I'm
will make
still
it
trying to
rain
figure it out. Okay.
Right.
Swiftly crashing forward. Deck, which you girly scream over, like, all the time, because you love Paladin. What? Actually, let's do this. Before we actually talk about the Paladin, let's see the Chua sacrifice deck that you showed us in the last episode as part of our mulligan in action.
Sure, why not? Greetings, mortals, and it's that time again for delicious Chua sacrifice. So we're playing the aggressive Paladin deck today, and we've got Mind Control Tech, Argent Squire, and Leroy Jenkins. Now, quite obviously, Leroy and Mind Control are going to go at this point. Leroy just because he costs too much, and Mind Control Tech because he's in here as a proxy card for me. A proxy card being a card you put in that's similar to the card you don't have, but not exactly the same. And it's just so you can test out a deck to see how it would work if you actually got that card. So I'm putting that in there simply to see if it's worth me getting the Tink Master before the meta shifts, because we are coming close to, or we are actually at the end of the new ranked season, and there's more than likely a beta patch coming up. So I just didn't want to get it yet. So, let's see what he does. He throws out our Amani Berserker, which is a little unfortunate for us, but we're just going to go ahead and drop a whole bunch of threats and run into his face. Now, that Amani Berserker is going to get very, very big next turn, but hopefully we're just going to be able to take it out with all the guys I have on the board, and then Divine Favor to make my hand size quite big again. Right, I think we are going to Divine Favor here just for the 2 cards, because there's not much else we can do right now. Well, we got some fairly decent cards at this point, so we're going to just run straight at him, because next turn we're going to want to be doing some tricky stuff with Sword of Justice and Southsea Deckhand. So we'll see how the turn plays out, but ideally I'd like to be able to play Sword of Justice and Deckhand next turn and try to clear his board. Oops, so he's running into stuff, which might end up not working as well as he's planning. Okay, so we're going to do exactly what I said. So while I am going to basically lose a charge off of my sword for nothing at this point, I am going to be able to effectively clear his board for only 2 cards. And I come back to having a reasonable board strength. And I can draw more cards, and I've got quite a lot of tricks still in my hand. But this is working out quite well for me. Oh, and the he only plays his little squire this turn, which is really good because the less cards he plays, the better it is for us. So I think I am going to go ahead and drop my Pyromancer and go ahead and give him Divine Shield. Now I'm not going to attack this turn with my sword, even though it sounds like a really good idea. I think I'd rather just keep it in backup, just in case I want to make something big if he uses Consecrate this turn. Because it is possible he can run both of his dudes into my stuff and Consecrate. But he's just going to play his Sword of Justice. True Silver Champion. Apparently I can do card names today. And we'll see what happens. Right, so this is going to work really well for me, because I'm just going to Avenging Wrath, and I'm going to be able to hit everything. It is going to take away my Divine Shield, which is unfortunate, but it's going to end up doing a lot of damage. So I'm going to manage to get... I managed to get 9 damage on him that turn. Yeah. So he hammers, he gets to draw a card, which means he's going to be able to heal 2 off of that, most likely. So what I want to do now is I'm just going to silence, because I want the 3-2 at this point. I want to make him waste his True Silver Champion charge. And I'm going to Divine Favor back up all my cards. So I still got 2 in reserve. And this is really unfortunate for him because I drew one of the 2 Acidic Swamp Oozers. So it's definitely going to come down. Even though I'm only eating 1 charge, it's 2 health he's not going to gain. And it means he is going to have to use some sort of board clear or play another True Silver to be able to get his board control back. So at this point we're looking to probably Avenging Wrath next turn, or if he plays a lot of creatures I can't deal with, I've got the Equality Avenging Wrath combo. No, he's just going to play True Silver and get himself a little bit of board control back. We'll see what he hits. So he's going to take 1 damage no matter what creature he kills. Decides to go for the Acidic Swamp Ooze, which is a good idea because if I am playing Pandas or something, it won't end up being able to bounce it back to my hand and do a bunch of crazy things for him. So what I am going to do now, I reckon Avenging Wrath's probably going to be my best bet at this point. I'm going to be able to hopefully clear his board. If not, it'd be unlucky. No, we clear his board, we send him down. I am going to make an Abusive Sergeant this turn, send him down to 3, so that he can't attack my bird next turn. And so that he gains neutral life. He doesn't gain anything for killing my Abusive Sergeant. Well, that was a pretty good turn for him. It did cost him a lot to do what he just did. But if I draw any direct damage spell at this point, I win. Anything with charge? No, but I am going to make myself a very, very big Blood Knight. And I think... Yep. So I'm going to make myself a very big Blood Knight and effectively clear his board. So there's not much he can do at this point, I don't think, to win. It could be something I'm not thinking of to gain him a whole bunch of life. But I think at this point, if he can't deal with... There we go. He would have to have dealt with the Blood Knight as well as gained a bunch of life that turn. And I don't think that was too feasible for him, even at 9 mana. So there we go. That's the True Sacrifice deck. That's how it works. It basically works by dropping your hand as often as possible, making as many good trades as you can, and then refilling your hand with that Divine Favor.
Okay, first off, that was an amazing game. I was just sitting there going, how the heck is he going to... Oh. But then... there was a lot of oh moments in there. So first off, you mentioned proxy cards. Now, you had stated that the Mind Control that you got in the Mulligan was actually a proxy card for, I believe, the Tankmaster Overspark. And we haven't really fully discussed it. You've kind of defined it in the actual play itself. But I want to know why, how,
Just why? Why would you do this? Um,
why?
it's easy. It's three main reasons. Reason number one. No, camera's over here. Reason number one. I'm lazy, basically. Boring. Reason number two. I don't, or I didn't have at the time, I do have now, enough dust to craft Tinkmaster Overspark. But it leads into reason three. I didn't want to craft Tinkmaster Overspark because I sense a beta patch on the horizon, and that guy going to get hit with the nerf hammer hard. He's going to be crying in a corner for days. Um, the new rank season started, and either halfway through this at the end or at the end of this, I'm predicting quite a big beta patch for two main reasons. One, the new the meta is going a bit stale, and there's some obvious cards that need a little bit of tweaking, and we are still in open beta, so you should come to expect that cards are going to get tweaked, cards are going to get changed completely, so are decks, and the meta is going to shift because of it. And because I'm not going to engage completely in this season of ranked, there was no point for me to actually spend all of my stuff to get it if it's just going to get changed.
Okay.
And on top of that, there was another reason. It's completely escaped my thought now. Mostly, rank's broken still, so I'm not really participating in it that much. I don't
Broken.
agree so much with the system that they're using right now, which is based off of total wins accumulated as opposed to win-loss ratio once you get to the higher levels, because there's certain barriers that everyone can meet, but once you start getting to the select sort of top echelon sort of stuff, it becomes who has the most time to play. And my time is a little bit divided right now and can't be completely devoted to Hearthstone, so it seems like a very limiting factor to me. So until that changes, while I'm still going to play a little bit of ranked, I'm not going to throw all my effort into it.
Well, it seems interesting to me that they would make that kind of judgment call. Granted, this is still a beta. You know, they're going to make choices and changes as things go. We'll see what they do with the actual constructed arena, or not arenas. Constructed arena is not a thing.
It'd be an
What
amazing thing.
It would be a crazy thing. I don't know how the heck you would pull off a constructed arena. That just seems impossible to actually be able to do, because they're two completely different concepts. But it does seem, when you start to put it on that, it's not so much the quality of your wins, but the quantity. And I don't know.
And that's exactly why.
And that does seem a little unfair, so I can kind of understand that. So that's how your proxy works. That's why you don't play with Tinkmaster Overspark and why you use a proxy instead. Fair enough.
Indeed.
Right. Now, the Paladin itself, what is special about it? Now, its hero power is for 2 mana to summon a 1/1 token on the board. Now, this to me, if I were to look at this from I was about to call it a juvenile perspective, but no.
Sure, we'll go with juvenile. It works well for you, Pseudo.
I was going to say a rookie perspective. To me, it seems like that's a waste of mana, because you are spending 2 mana to get a 1/1, which to me does not seem to have a very good quote-unquote card quality to it, because technically speaking, the hero powers are a card that's always active and available if you have the resource to spend it, like any other card out there. Which technically means, I guess, you actually have more cards than I thought. But still, that's what makes them special. It's what makes them special is the fact that you spend 2 mana, you get a 1/1. It has no text on it. It has no special thing. It's just a 1/1 creature on the board.
Yeah. So our vanilla drop bear had a baby. The paladin ability shall now be referred to as baby drop bear.
Baby drop bear.
It is baby drop bear.
Baby drop bear.
If you don't understand what a drop bear is, Google it and be amazed. It's an Australian thing. You'll love it. Next. So while it seems on the surface to be a sort of underpowered ability in respect to some of the other ones, like deal 1 damage and draw a card and
Well, that's
seemed
because it gets
amazing.
summoning sickness when you put it down, which means you can't use it the turn you put it down, which is why you would think it's not as amazing as just being able to instantaneously do 1 damage.
Well, that, and on top of that, it also costs 1 mana more than you'd expect a 1/1 creature to cost.
Mm-hmm.
But with that being said, he is always there. That little drop bear, he is cuddly and he is reliable. He is always there. So whether you're playing an aggro paladin deck, or whether you're playing a control paladin deck, control giants, or anything like that, he is always there. He's the guy you call, go, I need a pizza at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he's like, I'm on that.
The baby drop bear that brings us pizza. Okay.
Indeed.
So now we have the Paladin pizza baby drop bear. And
Sure, we'll go with that.
Is that what makes it special?
In my convoluted mind, this makes sense. Yes, that's exactly what makes him special. He's a creature, and you can do so much more with a creature than you can do with 1 direct damage, or that you can do with that 1 extra card, or that you can do with that 2 direct damage straight to the face. There's so much more you can do with a creature. The creature can get its buffs off of Sword of Justice. It can be buffed with Blessings of Kings. It can be buffed with Blessings of Champions. It can receive Divine Shield. It can trigger secrets. It can do so much stuff because it's a creature, and that's what makes it unique. And that's what makes it the special ability of the Paladin. It's special because it's a creature, not because it's effective, not because it's powerful. It's consistent, and it's a creature. He's always there.
Now, you've made mention of a lot of buffing here. Is that what makes the Paladin deck a Paladin deck? Just the fact that all of the Paladin-specific cards seem to be geared towards, literally, buffing.
Yes, so Paladin relies a lot on its ability to use Blessing of Kings and Divine Shield and those sorts of buffs to create really big stompy creatures that go to the face and do really cool stuff and attack for lots of damage and all that sort of stuff. But you have to be very wary when you're playing a Paladin, because buff cards, in essence, are negative card advantage for you. You are investing 2 cards into 1 creature, and you are hoping to hell that creature doesn't die. Otherwise, you are losing 2 cards for your 1 card. So if you put your Blessings of Kings on your Tyrian Fordring, and you've invested 2 cards into it, and then all of a sudden the mage turns around and goes, Polymorph, suck it. You're, you go into the fetal position and cry. And there's no coming back from that. So you have to be very wary about how you invest your cards as a Paladin, because it is a very bumpy road where you're investing multiple cards into one thing, and if it goes sideways, you're losing a lot of advantage.
So you're basically telling me that one of the things about the Paladin is that you need to accept you're always playing at a detriment. You're always going to be starting with less advantage, and it's a matter of trying to figure out how to play it, regardless of whether you're aggro or control, in such a style that the detriment doesn't actually stop you, but empowers you.
Yes, in that sense, when you talk about buffs solely, that's what they're doing. But just as with all classes, Paladin doesn't just do buffs, but
That's true.
It's what's most iconic about Paladins is that they buff stuff. You see the Divine Shield, you see the Blessings of Kings. They have lots of other stuff, but in essence, the buffs is what we really care about as new players. And I want to make sure you're using them most effectively.
Well, you made mention, and because of the fact that it is a Paladin aggro deck, which is the Chua sacrifice deck, because you're constantly sacrificing little dudes to make them bigger if you can. If not, you're using them to clear boards or what have you. But you also get rid of your cards really quickly, and yet you, was it Divine Sacrifice that brings all your cards back?
Divine Favor.
Divine Favor, where you get a lot of cards back. is that the mechanic behind what makes the Paladin aggro so good, or does that work in Paladin control as well?
Well, that's sort of in essence how Paladin aggro works. It works in a very different aggro style to the aggro mage. The aggro
Mm-hmm.
mage invests a lot of its cards and a lot of its resources into doing little combos that change into big power spikes. Whereas the Paladin aggro is very much about a war of attrition. It's I want to dump all my dudes, I want to dump all my cards as fast as possible, and then I want to draw a whole bunch more cards with Divine Favor. I'm going to overwhelm you, and you're going to have to deal with all these guys, and then, hey, look, once you've dealt with all these guys, I'm going to drop a whole bunch more.
That card just seems a little OP now.
Well, it's not OP simply because it requires your opponent to have cards as well. So if your opponent's playing an aggro deck as well, you sit there and go, well, he's got no cards in hand, I can play my Divine Favor and draw nothing. That seems amazing. But also, as it goes into later and later into the game, as your aggression starts to wean off, and the control players start to take a lot of control over the game, they're going to be sitting with maybe 3 cards, and they're going to be aware that you have Divine Favor, and that's your main form of refueling your hand, and they're going to drop as many cards as they can, so that Divine Favor isn't going to work very, very much in your favor.
Now, you stated that when it comes to playing the aggro, it's sort of a matter of dumping your hands. Is that really sort of one of the keys to the aggro, is to not have cards in your hand?
It's for the Paladin, it's very much it's not so much a key. It's about managing your creatures, managing your card intake and output. So if you want to be very safe, you're only going to want 2 or 3 creatures on the board at any point, but that's not going to win you the game very fast. It's not going to put you in an overwhelming position. It's about managing the medium between how many creatures can I put on the board and afford to lose,
Right.
and still be able to win.
See, I need to get that stuck in my head. This is the thing. You get so used to playing like MMOs or like Civ, for example, because, Civ got referenced a little earlier, so there you go. But you get so used to playing those games where you really don't quite want to sacrifice the pieces on your board. And yet, one of the things that makes an aggro deck so effective is the sacrifices that you make. It's just trying to make the best sacrifice, like get the 2 for 1 if you can, or like in the Magro deck where you had the 3 for 1. I mean, that mana worm that was just insane to watch in action. But I have to get through my head, just like I couldn't get through my head before. Oh my God, someone hit my health. I need to make that desperate play of mana coin, totemic call. Must protect myself from 1 damage. It's almost like I keep forgetting that the monsters you put down on the deck, or the monsters you put down, should be sacrificed. There's nothing wrong with killing them off. Granted, you want to try to keep the ones that have really good meta text to them, because they may do some kind of bonus or what have you. For example, when we get into shamans, and I squeal like a little girl because I really love certain shaman cards, and I'm all like, ee! But in the end, it's a matter of sacrificing and being okay with that sacrifice.
Yeah.
And I need to get that through my head. I don't know why I keep forgetting. I don't know whether it's because of the games that I've played in the past or what have you, but I just got to remember, it's okay to kill your minions.
New players get very emotionally attached to their cards.
No, we don't. Not really.
It's right.
I just want to
I'm dissociative. It's fine. They can go in the bin,
Well, you've got a sacrifice pit, and you seem to really appreciate that.
That's it. I use my sacrifice pit a lot. But you think about it very much in chess terms. You have to make those sacrifices to win the game. If you have to sacrifice your queen to win the game, you sacrifice that queen. She going back in the kitchen and making the king a sandwich.
You've heard it here first.
I'm sure some people will be all up on me for that comment.
Well, it's said in jazz, but to me it's hysterical because living in the United Kingdom, we have a queen, and she's the monarch. Her husband is not king.
It is a remnant of a bygone era, I'm afraid, but It is how chess works, therefore the metaphor still stands.
Yes, this is true. Okay, so basically what we need to do as new players is be okay with our sacrificial pit for our minions. And
Yes.
when it comes to Paladin, you can play control and you can play aggro. And it makes a difference which one you go with because the divine favor really does kind of help you ebb and control. Is that one of those cards that is just in all Paladin decks?
No, Divine Favor is almost completely useless in Paladin control. The
Oh,
idea of giants is to hoard your cards so that you don't have to. Um, so you can play your giant earlier and you don't have to sort of make those sacrifices super early. You don't have to dump your hand super early. That's the whole point of giant control. It sort of works. It works very much in reverse to the aggro paladin in lots of ways. It wants to be the person that holds all those cards and then consecrates and then plays a giant, or plays equality and consecrate and then a giant. Do lots of stuff on the same turn.
okay. I will get there. I will get there.
Yeah.
Now, same question I asked you before. Is there anything, and I say before, I actually mean when we're talking about mages, is there any class that the paladins really struggle against? Or is it again just really about the type of deck you create?
It's always about the type of deck you create. Every class has a certain area in which they excel. They have a certain set of cards which are more effective than the other class's set of cards. They've got all these unique things, but at the end of the day, their uniqueness doesn't mean squat because every class is unique. It's
Everyone's a
you're
unique
beautiful.
snowflake,
That's
therefore
it. Your
nobody is
beautiful
unique.
snowflakes syndrome. That's the one. So it's all about how, once again, harping on, and I will harp on about this till the end of days. It's not about what you're playing, it's about where your goals are and how you achieve those goals. So, once
Okay.
again, it doesn't matter if you're playing an aggro pally, aggro shaman, aggro whatever, it doesn't matter if you're playing control, blah blah blah. It's about how you get there and you get back into your this deck will beat that deck because they use this range of cards. It's not about because they're this class.
Okay. So that's paladins, and you bring up an excellent point. This is one of the things you're trying to drill into our rookie heads and make certain that we really understand. It's how you play what you've been given. But part of that, especially in constructed, even in arena where you have to pick certain cards in Hearthstone, it is all about having a goal for your deck. Now, this leads us to a deck that was sent to us by Harsey, who is, might I add, our number one, very first official moderator for MMO Buff.
Yeah.
Woo! And the deck they have given us is the TheInnerMurloc. Now, you threw a challenge out last week, and it was the challenge of building a viable Murloc deck that could be successful. And one of the things we discussed is that the Murloc deck, which for those of you who play Magic the Gathering is pretty much a direct ripoff of this third deck, is difficult to master, easy to put together, but difficult to build a quality deck that you can really put into play. And the deck that we were handed was the TheInnerMurloc. So, while we are looking at this TheInnerMurloc, oh my gosh, it's a Murloc deck. I love Murlocs. Mainly because Mizpah hates them.
Oh well, that's a good reason to like anything, to be honest.
And one of the first things I look at when I have a deck sent to me is the mana curve. Because one of the first things we talked about was the mana curve. And it sort of helps me I look at it and I go, okay, I think it's this. Now we know based on the amount of stars I have lost and gained that I don't quite have it managed yet. And I have to recognize that spells and creatures do impact whether a deck and its curve actually mean the same thing, etc. I get that. I'm still learning, but it's the first thing I look at. The very first thing that I notice with this deck is that it is purely front loaded with from 5 and below. So two things occur to me. One, Murlocs are aggro, and two, there's nothing big. Nothing big at all. Is that a bad thing? There's like, I mean, I,
Oh, the whole point of Murlocs is to use that innate synergy in being a Murloc to overpower your opponent. You get all those extra buffs from having all the other Murlocs, and then you play another Murloc, and everything else gets bigger. So Murlocs in themselves, if you get the right circumstances, are big, cheap, effective creatures. They're big, stompy dudes, and there's lots of them. So you don't necessarily need big, stompy dudes at the end of your curve.
okay, but the problem is, as we know within Hearthstone, you are limited to how many creatures you can have on the board at any one time. So it's not like
Yep.
I can summon the Murloc forces from the tidal wave and be all, you will die. It doesn't quite work like that.
Not so much,
You
no.
kind of have to make good choices. Wow, imagine us saying something like that on a TCG or a CCG show. You
Making good
have to
choices
make good
apparently a good
choices.
choice.
It's apparently got its point. But one of the things, like I said, that stuck out to me was that there was nothing big, so there's nothing to deal with that sort of end game thing, which reinforces my opinion that it's aggro. So I know I'm right. It's aggro. That's what a Murloc deck is going to be. What I found interesting about this deck is that it's a priest aggro deck. I didn't expect a priest aggro. I actually expected a shaman aggro deck, if you want me to be blunt with you. I expected a shaman aggro deck to be brought forth to us, but in this particular case, we've got our priest one. So,
So,
let us think on it from the perspective of what is successful about this and what do we still not have mastered yet so that we can either try again or do we get 10 gold stars and we all go to the zoo? That's, I guess, the first question. Do we all get 10 gold
no,
stars or
no gold stars for Pseudo. So
does the
we'll
audience
start
get
off.
gold stars?
I think the audience should get half a gold star simply for participation. I like that. You get no gold stars for participation because
I
you
have
want
to
me
be here.
doing this, not the other way around. Um, so we start off. While this looks very aggro, it's very top loaded. It suffers from the same problem you had last time with recognizing whether something is control or aggro, and it's the fact that while you can look at the mana curves for hints, you still need to look at the cards quite a lot, and you'll see that all the really low stuff is very directed towards survival and buffing, as opposed to going to the face smacky snacky. I deal with this, I deal with that sort of stuff. So it's not aggro in that sense at all.
Right.
It strikes me as a very controlly uh, Murloc build in which you want to hoard a lot of Murlocs in your hand and drop them all at the same time while still controlling the game state with being able to drop, little taunters that can receive Powered Shield or Divine Spirit or Inner Fires. And then if you still have those cards when you go to drop all your Murlocs, well, look at that. All of a sudden my Murlocs are much bigger. So it seems as though it might be an aggro deck because it's so trending towards the lower half of the mana curve, but it just doesn't play that way.
It doesn't play that way.
No, it could never play that way because there's just not enough threats. So you're missing this. If you look at it in the context of all cards, it's missing all those super aggressive Murlocs to start with, like Blue Gill Warrior and Murloc Raider, and even Murloc War Leader's missing out of this, which is your super aggressive Murloc 3-drop. So it's missing a lot of those really aggressive Murloc cards. So it's more a Murloc deck about controlling the game state and then dumping all your Murlocs, as opposed to dumping as many Murlocs as possible and then trying to control the game state.
Now, if that happens to be the case, I don't see anything to like draw cards or anything else like that because of the fact that it's a control deck. Does that make sense? I mean, does it kind of actually work together? Oh, well, there is one. I mean, Power Word Shield does let you draw a card, but Um, yeah.
It draws a few cards. It's got your Northshire Clerics. The deck's very contingent on drawing Northshire Cleric or Powered Shield to
Power
get
Shield.
that little extra boost of drawing. Um, but the problem is, it's there's not a lot of things to heal, if that makes sense. You want to be hoarding your Murlocs, so you shouldn't have to heal your Murlocs because they shouldn't be in play until you're ready to win. And everything else, Frostwolf Grunt is just a little bit too low to be able to heal to get that card. Northshire Cleric's going to eat a removal. No matter who you're playing against, that thing eats removal. It might as well have Taunt. So you're not going to be healing him more than once, maybe twice if you're super lucky. So, and then you look at your late game stuff, and unfortunately your late game stuff comes in a little bit too late to be able to benefit from a Northshire Cleric, because by the time you hit to late game, you've already reached the sort of critical mass point where you want to start dropping those Murlocs. So the theory, I
Right.
really like the theory of this deck. I'm tinkering with something very similar. I love the theory of this deck, where it's not your traditional.
It's almost like a one-turn kill Murloc deck that you're shooting for.
Yes, it's almost like one turn kill Murloc, and I love it. I think it's very. It shows a lot of thought into how the metagame's sort of working, but it's just not quite there yet. You're missing. Murloc deck needs three things really to work effectively. It
Okay.
needs Murlocs to start with. Murlocs are a pretty key point in Murloc deck, but it needs the right Murlocs. So the deck's
Right.
missing to be that sort of dump your hand in one turn thing. The deck's missing Murloc War Leader to start with. That's the obvious sort of gap. It's the epic. Yes, it's the epic Murloc. It's a 3/3 for 3, which is okay already, but all other Murlocs get +2/+1. That's great. It's fantastic. So
That's
it needs,
that needs to be hit with a Nerf bat.
but it's missing that one very key card there. So
Okay.
it needs Murlocs. It needs the right Murlocs. Next, it needs card draw. Card draw is really important because you need to be able to get the right Murlocs. So it's not just about having Murlocs, but you have to have the right ones to make everything effective.
Right.
So while you've got a lot of the really good Murlocs in here, a lot of the really synergistic Murlocs, Cold Light Oracle really doesn't work too well in many Warlock Murloc. It's the word I'm looking for. Murloc
Murloc
decks
decks.
because he is in himself. He is card disadvantage because he costs you a card to give your opponent two cards. Sure you can draw two cards, but your opponent didn't have to invest anything to get his two cards off you. So you're giving your opponent cards. So unless that Cold Light Oracle is going to let you win, then it's a disadvantage having him.
Oh.
So a lot of people saw Cold Light Oracle floating around a lot in the old Freeze Mage decks
Mm-hmm.
because Cold Light Oracle was in there because he was really cheap draw cards and it was just another draw spell to get more free spells to draw out the game longer. He worked really well in that thing because it didn't matter how many cards your opponent had. As soon as they play a card or a creature, it gets frozen. Doesn't matter. Don't have to deal with it. So that's how they dealt with it.
Right.
But you need ways to deal with it, which leads us to point 3, which is you need ways to protect your Murlocs. So this deck does protection okay, but the card choices are a bit on the lower end of good. So Frostwolf Grunt, he's not a fantastic card at all. He You should consider something like Sun Fury Protector, which is in the same spot. It's a 2-drop, and it's a 2/3, which already makes it pretty
Better.
good. And then the adjacent cards both get taunt.
That's
So
right.
you have the availability to get 2 taunts off of him. So while it doesn't have an innate taunt like Frostwolf Grunt does, he's more effective and more versatile.
Right. So, based on what you're saying with the three things that we've got, the only thing that's really, really lacking in this is the fact that not the right Murlocs were chosen,
Yep.
and the fact that the protection of the Murlocs is just a little off. So, I mean, we're getting closer here. I mean, like you said, I absolutely love the concept of a one-turn kill Murloc deck that, if is set up properly, I turn around and go, Mizpa, Mizpa, OTK.
Can't touch this. Yeah.
But I really, I love the concept. So, Hersey, man, seriously, awesome, awesome, awesome direction. You're definitely showing you are learning things. We just, I guess, didn't fully get to where you needed to go, but you're almost there. And
Yeah,
you've
it's
actually
a great
created a
progression.
deck that Marsh might want to play once it's finished. Because as Marsh said, you know, he wants decks to play. And this is a creative thought. This is absolutely creative in a concept. It's not your average aggro rush. It is a control Murloc.
Yeah,
It's a
and
control
that's
concept.
effectively what it ends up being is
Easy.
control Murloc. But you have to remember, Pseudo, that you can't OTK with Murlocs because they cost
Too much.
their cost is really quite high. So
Yeah.
you sort of build up your kill potential by playing a couple of Murlocs and giving them more health, and giving them more health and more attack, and then giving them more stats, and forever and always.
That just makes me wonder about a
But
Paladin Murloc deck with all those
Paladin Murloc's
buffs.
out there.
Oh, I'm sure it is. I'm
But
sure
no,
it
it's
is.
I'm very impressed of the thought that's gone into this deck. That you can tell there's been a lot of thought. While it doesn't necessarily align with how I think about decks, it's good that the person who created this deck has thought about what they want to achieve and how they want to achieve it, and they picked the cards that go in the middle that align with both those ends of the spectrum. It's gone, I want to do this, this is how I want to achieve it, and these are the cards that I think are going to help me get there most effectively. And the only part we disagree on right now is the bit in the middle. It's the how am I going to achieve this bit that we're disagreeing on. It's not anything at either end. I love the concept. It's just the card selection needs tuning. That's it.
People are learning from our show, Marsh. Oh my gosh, what are we gonna do?
I don't know, it's almost like one of us is a teacher.
And almost like one of us is a rookie. But based on that, we've now gone through everything, which obviously means the final thing, the weekly challenge.
To be feared and misunderstood.
And our weekly challenge is all about the Paladin, which is what we've discussed today. Go figure.
Surprise, surprise.
Go figure, the Paladin. So, the Paladin itself, as we've discussed, has a couple of interesting things. If you want to make a Paladin control, Paladin combo, Paladin Murloc, whatever, create for us a Paladin deck of Hooah! And let's see if we're actually getting there. You've learned a couple of new things. You've learned a little bit about proxies, which is kind of important in many, many, many ways. And, let's see what you guys come up with. Do you have any, I guess, stipulations or rules you want to place on the Paladin deck?
No, like, I'm perfectly fine if people want to do Paladin aggro, Paladin control. Paladin combo would surprise me. I'd like to see that. Um, but yeah, I want to see your interpretation. So I don't want a direct copy of what you saw being in my Chewer Sacrifice deck. That's the only thing I don't want to see. I don't want to see anyone going, oh, here's my deck. Oh, it's a one-for-one copy of Marsh's deck. Oh, it's amazing. Look at it. I want to see original ideas. I want to see how people are, doing those 3 points. What are you doing? How are you achieving it? And what's the stuff in the middle?
And name it well.
Yes, name is very important.
Name is important. Right, and it is at this point in time that I do say, Marsh, you, as always, have been an absolute pleasure, and it's great to actually see you this time.
Yeah, in that quality 160p quality webcam.
I
But it's
love how the
there, and
quality
that's
of your
what counts.
webcam has gone down as I've been speaking to you throughout the day. It was 240p, now it's 160.
I need to go get the box because I actually do think it's like 160p or floating somewhere around there.
At least we
Don't
get
do
to
don't do
see you,
that
you
one.
immortal thing, you.
I wonder if it's no, it's not actually on the webcam. Unfortunate.
So, any words of wisdom for the minions? Mortals, not
Uh,
minions. For us measly
both.
mortals.
I will enslave them one day. My plans for world domination. Anyway,
Yeah.
if you have any questions or you want to run a deck idea by me for any of the classes, you have an idea that you think would be great, but you just can't think of that extra couple of cards, feel free to contact me. My Twitter is at Dr. underscore Marshmellows.
It's underneath his
It's,
name as
it's
well.
down there
Down
somewhere, I'm
there.
sure of it. Pseudo
Yes.
takes care of that stuff. But yeah, send me a tweet, send me a deck link. You can always put a comment on the MMOBuff.TV link or on the comments on YouTube. We're always happy to help. Plenty of time for our readers and watchers and all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. Right. Marsh, I shall now let the summoning fade. I will unfold the space time continuum, place in some pecan and honey and maple, refold it, and bake us back to the future.
I need a cup of tea. Unfortunately, if I drank it, melting, melting.
Back to you in the future.